All right, hello and welcome everybody to According to Andrew number 35. Um, does free speech exist and do we even want it? I was kind of inspired to do this because I had read an article by Alexander Marcus called Tyranny Inc. and how he describes how a lot of the ideas of the Constitution and stuff like that are constantly exported and never and aren't really applied. And so I wanted to kind of talk about whether or not this idea of freedom of speech like even exists, if it's really a thing, and kind of explore a couple different avenues there. And then after reading this, it reminded me of a Vox Day stream that he did a while back, um, almost a year ago now, or 2 years ago, called "Freedom of Speech is Not a Right." And so, going off of those two things, I'm going to kind of try to construct an argument that freedom of speech maybe isn't exactly what it's all cracked up to be, and kind of what our paths are going forward. Um, so hopefully you find it interesting. I definitely recommend checking out both the article and the video. I will link them both in the description of the videos that you're watching or podcasts if you guys are interested in looking those up. Anyway, so freedom of speech. So let's just get into Marcus's argument here. So he makes it so the government isn't supposed to be able to abridge any of your speech, but this kind of runs into a major contradiction when it comes to freedom of assembly. Before we dive into that, let's just go over what the wording of the First Amendment is in the United States Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exchange or free exercise of or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government to redress of grievances. So obviously, having lived through 2020, none of this was respected this year. So right there, you could probably end. I could just end my argument right there. Churches were closed; they're not allowed to do that. You weren't able. Speech has been closed down by big tech. Peaceful assemblies were not allowed unless they were of a particular political persuasion, and you were not really allowed to redress the grievances that you might have of your government. So, with all that being said, let's kind of get into Marx's article and some of the issues that are upheld through basically the censorship thing and why companies are incentivized to censor people. And he does a good job by framing it under from a libertarian approach, and I think he doesn't strawman the situation. So one of the articles says, let's see. So Title 29 of the Code of Federal Regulations covers labor laws. In Chapter 14 of Title 29 regulates the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So I think a lot of this came in with the Civil Rights era, 1960, and the adjective changes the noun, right? So civil rights are not rights because they fly in the face of other rights. That's kind of a different argument to this whole thing. I'm gonna not get into that because it's just a different topic. We'll maybe cover that another day. And in particular, Part 604 of Chapter 14 provides guidelines on discrimination because of sex. So it reads as follows: harassment on the basis of sex is a violation. Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of sexual nature constitute sexual harassment when such conduct has the effect of creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. Really pay attention to the intimidating, hostile, or offensive, especially the offensive one, working environment. An employer may also be responsible for the acts of non-employees with respect to sexual harassment. Remember, non-employees. In the workplace where the employer or its agents are supervisory employed, know that they should have known the conduct and fails to take immediate action. Prevention of this is the best tool for elimination of sexual harassment. An employer should make all steps necessary to prevent sexual harassment from occurring, such as affirmatively raising the subject, expressing strong disapproval, developing appropriate sanctions, informing employees of the rights to raise and how to raise the issues of harassment under Title 7, and developing methods of sensitivity of all concerned. So, um, when you first hear that, the thing that you might be thinking of is, a waitress at a bar, and one of the patrons is, trying to get her number, or maybe sexual harassing her, slapping her on the ass, kind of thing. Uh, and then that person would be summarily removed from the establishment. And most people are like, that seems completely reasonable, and I agree. But because of the nature of man, and the idea that if there's any way that this can be exploited, it will be exploited, there's room for a much broader expanse of this, and that is basically what the tech giants have taken hold of. So, this is summarized by Alexander by: sexual harassment is a violation of federal regulation. Sexual harassment occurs when conduct has the effect of creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. An employer can be held liable for non-employee conduct, and that it knows or should have known about. To avoid liability, the employer should take all steps necessary to stop the offensive conduct. Now keep this in mind as we put the pieces together. And then all right. And then he makes a real world kind of random thing. So he says, under the group. So he's basically saying, if there was a Reddit thread that said women don't exist, or r/women don't exist, in this group the forum trolls post long diatribes explaining why, in their view, the female sex simply does not exist. And so he mocks up a fake argument. Now, it seems self-evident that women don't exist is a ridiculous and ignorant viewpoint that is definitely stupid, but nevertheless, it is a viewpoint. People are allowed to say things that are ridiculous, ignorant, and indefensibly stupid. Viewpoint discrimination is forbidden by the 1A guarantee of freedom of speech, as we saw in Mattal versus Tame. The government couldn't pass a law making the viewpoint illegal. However, it also seems self-evident that women don't exist as a viewpoint that will cause offense to a great many people, particularly to, women. Which is like trying to regulate the fact that, like, people's feelings might get hurt. I don't know. It seems like they describe government as like being like a parent, like an overbearing parent, and like this just kind of hits that nail on the head like really well, where it's this idea of like a nanny state of, well, it might offend someone, so we can't allow it for anybody and stuff like that. It's like it doesn't matter. But anyway, so let's say you imagine you're the CEO of Talkish or Reddit, and you are a hardcore libertarian who will stop at nothing in your relentless promotion of freedom. Every day you look down at the wide range of viewpoints and you say that's great. Then your vice president of human resources say there's issues over this thread, women don't exist, and then they run through the checklist. Sexual harassment occurs when the conduct has the effect of creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Check. An employer can be held liable if a non-employee conduct it knows about has offended said person. Check. Sexual harassment is a violation of federal regulation. Check. To avoid liability, the employer should take all steps necessary to stop offensive conduct. So they're basically stuck in the fact that they now have to regulate speech. You wanted to run a free speech platform, but you couldn't. The federal government regulations forced you to, on pain of significant monetary fines, to abridge the freedom your users, even though the federal government itself couldn't have passed those regulations. So it's kind of the wizardry of the whole thing. Obviously, there's a way that you could potentially fight this and get this stuff overturned if that's really hardcore what you believed in. And so that kind of is the main thing that's going on there. Uh, so private institutions are going to construct things and make it so that you can't have freedom of speech. They basically say that you're allowed to be kicked off at any time for whatever reason, because they can always just put in the words of you can create an intimidating work environment for someone, and that makes us, because they're scared, we have to remove you, kind of thing. So, but the thing is, this kind of stuff, like it was never really enforced that well. So I've experienced this throughout like most of my life. Um, you know, in high school, I made an off-color joke that people were offended by, and I had to apologize for it. And then I was told that there was no such thing as freedom of speech when it came to talking stuff. And this is public school. Like, sure, there might have been like it was not over the announcements and stuff like that. Most people don't even pay attention to it. Most people miss the joke anyway. And it was a high school joke. It wasn't that good, but who cares? Um, the Now it turns out that wasn't actually true. I was being lied to, but at the same time, it's like this idea that you aren't allowed a freedom of speech. And I was in my high school years, like 2 weeks to graduation. I didn't really care that much. Um, but like this idea that you don't actually have freedom of speech is like ridiculous. Um, or there's no point in having freedom of speech if it never can be applied, right? So it's like, well, you can only have freedom of speech on every other Tuesday when you're standing at the mall in Washington, D.C., facing east. Then you can say whatever you want. It's like, okay, well, then the law might as well not freaking exist. So, because of that kind of contradiction that's right there, and then on top of that, you have the idea that you have all these, you have like colleges you're not allowed freedom of speech at, and you have these double jeopardy laws, and basically, the as Marcus pointed out, it's tyranny Inc. They basically have created it. We live under a tyrannical government that is run by corporations, and it is sanctioned by it's not sanctioned by, but it's sanctioned by the United States corporation by basically saying, I give you license to do what I am not allowed to do. And by doing this two-step process, they can enforce all the laws that they want to enforce on the people, but can't. Now, there might be a legal remedy or legal way to push back against this. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. Um, so we will see about all that stuff, but uh, it'll be interesting. But um, there's other places where this same kind of logic applies, where if you're giving testimony during a trial, right? So that is a public institution. That is the government. The judicial branch is one of the three branches of government. You are not allowed to lie. You are not allowed to lie to Congress. Okay, both of these are blatant violations of the freedom of speech. Especially, like, both of them are in context, especially, like, the Congress one, where it's like, you're not allowed to lie to your government. It's like, okay, why is the government allowed to lie to me then? Right? Like, why is this flow not both ways? And so these kind of things show that we don't have freedom of speech, and we don't seem to really care about it. Because I don't know about you, but when a witness is on the stand, I'd like them to not lie. You know, like this idea, like freedom of speech doesn't work. And then it also is in direct contradiction with freedom of assembly. So if you have a person and like they have a private property, and there's someone that goes onto that property, and then they say stuff that they don't like, and they decide to remove that person, that has made it so that that person has the person that owns private property has freedom of assembly, and they have decided that they want to remove that person. Everything's good, except for that person's freedom of speech has technically been violated if we believe it, not in a pure legalistic sense, but in a cultural sense, right? He said something that just like the person didn't like. Like, let's just go with the women example. He said he came to this establishment and said women don't exist. And the guy was like, that's absurd. I'm going to remove you. And you know, that's fine. Like, we don't, another great example that Owen always used to use was, you don't want somebody during the middle of a symphony to be screaming random incoherent things and then saying like, oh, you can't handle my speech, bro. It's like, we don't want to listen to your drivel while we're trying to listen to a beautiful symphony. Um, and but that's technically a violation of freedom of speech. And so like you just kind of run into all these logical these conflicts where it logically they don't things don't mesh. These two things are contradictory. They can't exist in the same space. And so we have to kind of accept that maybe one of those things doesn't actually isn't actually what we're looking for and doesn't give us what we actually want. Um, so uh, that kind of covers whether or not freedom of speech exists. I personally don't find it really does. It's constitutionally it's um, you are never really in a situation in which you're on public land and allowed to speak freely. And those situations that it does allow for that are so narrow that it might as well not exist. The example that was given at the end of this article of Tyranny Inc. was basically the prohibition thing, but he used it in terms of guns. Like, you're allowed to own a gun, but you're not allowed to make one or manufacture one or sell bullets. And it's like, okay, sure, I guess it's legal. And prohibition was the same way. You were allowed to drink alcohol, but you weren't allowed to own alcohol or sell alcohol in any establishment. And it's like, okay, yeah, I guess it's technically still illegal, or technically still legal, but like the manufacture and the sale of it is illegal. It on its face, it's blatantly absurd. Um, so what was kind of the point of free speech? Well, the point of free speech was actually to just take down Western civilization. It was an Enlightenment invention, uh, and so it's not necessarily like it's probably something that we don't even want necessarily within our societies, because it's just a way for subversives to come in and be able to undermine our pillars and then not have any way to stand up or prevent them from doing these things. And there used to be checks and balances in place to prevent them from doing these things. There used to be blasphemy laws on the books. There used to be, well, I don't know if there's necessarily truth laws on the books, but we'll get into that later. But the blasphemy laws are the big one, and we should bring those back. So this goes into Vox's thing where he covered J.V. Berry's argument for that, and he basically said that there are no such thing as natural rights, which if there aren't natural rights, then you don't have a right to freedom of speech. And he basically said the reason that we need to have these kind of things is because we uh, we need to have these type of things because you never know when those kind of arguments are going to come up. So, or not when those arguments are going to come up, but he wanted to be able to explore new and interesting ideas like gay marriage and socialism. By the way, written in 1911 or 1913. So they've been trying to get the things that we are currently living through for a very, very long time. And this is kind of all like the Enlightenment thinkers. They always do this thing where they try to attack the foundation and act like you don't need a foundation for anything, and want to establish a house on sand effectively. But even that is more foundational than what they want. They want to build a house on air effectively. They think it's Minecraft where gravity doesn't exist for blocks and stuff. I don't know. Maybe not a great example, but so it's something that is simply used by our enemy to try to destroy us. So we probably shouldn't allow them a weapon that they don't equally allow us to use back to them. As you can see with like Facebook and stuff like that, the instant they're like freedom of speech, freedom of speech, freedom of speech, until they got control of everything. Once they had it under control, they locked that shit down super hard. No more speaking for you. Must be excised and banned. All right, well, if that's how you're going to do it, then that's how we got to play our game. If they come in spouting their bullshit about, you need, this is a Christian organization and we believe in Christian, ChristianMingle.com. Christian Mingle has to let gay people on their site. No, get out of here. You're fired. Like, just like there can be no wiggle room with this stuff. So now that I've kind of established, like, does it exist? Do we really even want it to exist? Let's kind of get into what we could replace it with, because we don't want a 1984 truth ministry, right? That's not a good thing. It's basically what we have right now. with Twitter censoring and be like, this isn't accurate kind of thing. So centralized truth ministry isn't what we want, but we want things that are the true, the beautiful, and the good. And the reason we don't want a truth ministry is because it's not actually truth ministry. If there was a centralized ministry that actually cared about upholding the truth and coming and believing in the truth and stuff like that would be great. But that's never going to happen because people have alternative agendas to actually speaking the truth. There are a very small and limited amount of people that are super dedicated to the truth to a degree where it won't personally harm them. And I'm really glad those people exist. Yeah, I want to say I'm one of those people, but I also feel like I'm not perfect, so it seems like anyway. Moving on, Owen is definitely one of those people. Let's put it that way. And so is Vox. Anyway, so we can bring back blasphemy laws. That's a good help. We don't want a centralized truth ministry. So how do we get there? So we have basically a decentralized truth ministry, if that makes sense. Well, not a truth ministry, but if you have a decentralized system, it makes it so that that's the main issue is we had a centralized system. We had people that believe they're like, oh no, we care about the true, beautiful, and good. The instant they got in there and got power, they expelled everybody that actually believed in it, got everyone in there that agreed with their corruption, lies, and deception. And once that happened, they decided what the truth was, right? Like this classic postmodernism. We don't even know what the truth is, man. It's you gotta the classic postmodern thing of like we can never actually know what truth is, and so that's what's going on there. What else do we got? So we want to be able to dispel that. So the basic way we do it is we have a decentralized institutions, and we have lots of little small ones, basically kind of what's happening over on Social Galactic. Go join it. And unauthorized TV, also go join it. If you join unauthorized, you get Social Galactic, so that's a win-win. And even with things like Parler and stuff like that, and sure, they might be converged, but, they're a right-wing converged gatekeeper type thing. Like, the right, like, if the neocons want their own space, let them frickin' have it. I don't care. I'm not going to be in that space, and I'm going to do my own thing. But, yeah. And so we have all these little pockets, and then the matter of the fact is, yeah, sure, maybe evil can take over a good chunk of them, but the matter of the fact is, a man with God is the majority, and so, that is what the focus, or that's not what the focus is, but, the truth will always shine brighter and attract more people to it, and the more decentralized it is, the harder it is going to be to cover up things like they are doing on Twitter and all that stuff. And that's one of the reasons that they hate the internet so much, because they accidentally created this super decentralized system, even though they have like these centralized pillars of like YouTube and stuff like that. And I'm still on YouTube, so I'm helping the whole centralization process to a certain degree. But because even though the where you upload stuff is still centralized to a certain degree, the way people can get information is decentralized, and that was a big change. And so as we get into this more, where we're maybe going to see institutions decentralized too, it'll be even more decentralized, and it'll be harder for Satan and his minions to take control of it. And the more decentralized it is, the harder it is. To a point, there's a divide and conquer. Like you still need groups and societies and stuff like that, but and once you get down to the individual level, they're really easy to conquer. Once you get it up to a really big level where it's a centralized thing, it's just one point where they have to just they only need one successful subversive campaign to get it, corrupt the whole thing, and you shut the whole other people down. So we don't want that. So the best way to do is kind of like a mix, or like an in-between, where it's kind of like the Bears setup, or where you have kind of a centralized group or culture that understands each other, and they kind of make things and do their own thing, and there's people making stuff over here and making stuff over there, and even like you can't really infiltrate like the Bears, because there's aspects of them all over the place. You can't even if you take down like one of the things that somebody created over here, there's still like another spot for the people that are true Bears to kind of gravitate and flock to, or it's going to spring up something else new when they notice that that institution's been corrupted. And so it makes it so that the people that are seeking and wanting to find truth will gravitate towards it. People that don't want truth are always going to sit in there, and the people that haven't been exposed to truth will inevitably, they'll accidentally run across it at some point. You're kind of seeing that with the election right now, not to get back into that too much, but there's a good chunk of people that were sleeping at the wheel to a certain extent and didn't think that corruption on this scale could exist, and they're kind of coming awake to that. And maybe, that's as far as they go. Maybe they won't take the next step in the truth cycle, but maybe they will. And so we'll kind of have to wait and see what's going on with that. But it'll be an exciting time. So that's kind of my thoughts on the whole thing. Just to kind of, as a final thing, I was actually meant to put this up earlier, but so we want the true, the beautiful, and the good, and that's why when I first started to do this podcast, I would always do pictures like this, because it really helps encapsulate what the beautiful drawings and paintings and stuff like that used to come back in the day before we had our certain institutions and stuff like that. And like, just look at all the amazing work and beauty that was put into this, and the amount of time and effort that took to create something like that. And it's not like that stuff can't be created to do it. There are certain people, but it's not nearly as prevalent as it used to be, and it's something that we've lost, but I'm hoping that we'll get back. So yeah, it's wonderful to see. Anyway, hopefully that helps cover that topic. It was kind of all over the place, but yeah, I hope you found it interesting. Anyway, I've been Andrew. This has been Does Freedom of Speech Exist? When do we even want it to exist? Thank you guys for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe on whatever you're on, YouTube, BitChute, Podbean. I'll have the link to the Vox's video that's over on BitChute, and the blog post by Alexander, linked in the description below. So click on those if you're interested in more information. But anyway, thank you guys for listening, and have a good day.